The Infiniti QX80 is one of those full-sized SUVs that has stood the test of time. It has weathered economic downturns and high gas prices, but also has taken on the titans in this segment, such as the Lincoln Navigator and Cadillac Escalade for almost 20 years, which is pretty remarkable. Out of the foreign manufacturers that are in this particular segment, it's the Infiniti QX80 that's been the most successful, and I really want to find out why. We've reviewed most of the vehicles in the Infiniti lineup, but the QX80 year over year seems to do quite well, and Americans seem to really love this SUV. So in this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the QX80, see how it compares to other SUVs in this segment, and also see why, if you're looking to upgrade from a 3-row crossover and you want to have a bit more practicality, but also have a vehicle that feels a bit more upscale and luxurious, then maybe taking a look at the Infiniti QX80 might be a great decision. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Infiniti of Norwood in Norwood, Massachusetts, for allowing me to do this review. I also want to give a huge shout and thank you to Adam, who's the general manager, for inviting me down here to check out the QX80. The link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive Infiniti inventory. Also, before we get started, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you're notified every time a new video goes live on the channel. And so, without wasting any further time, let's get right in this review. Infiniti, as we know the brand today, is in the midst of restructuring their lineup to where they can offer enticing vehicles that are both luxurious and enjoyable to drive. The QX80 has been an important piece of this puzzle, as it's been the flagship for the manufacturer since its arrival to the market. And while this SUV is due for a major overhaul in the near future, Infiniti has continued to be a legitimate threat to rivals in this segment. With full-size 3-row SUVs in demand in the US, the question that remains is whether the QX80 still has what it takes to appeal to buyers looking for an alternative to the Lincoln Navigator or Cadillac Escalade. Starting off with pricing, the model we have today is a Sensory, coming in at just over $88,000, finding itself at a reasonable cost as it undercuts many in this market. When taking into account that American luxury brands have dominated the large SUV segment for decades, Infiniti has stood toe-to-toe with these juggernauts, and in fact has been a staple for the brand for quite some time. Being built on a body-on-frame chassis, you'd think that the QX80 would demonstrate its rugged DNA with its close relation to the Nissan Titan. But in fact, it's quite the opposite, as Infiniti is going to give buyers a ride quality and experience that's fitting for an SUV in this price range. While not an off-roader by any means, you will have 9.2 inches of ground clearance to explore the paths less traveled, or to take on winter road conditions. More impressive is that you have a towing capacity of up to 8,500 pounds, allowing you to go on cross-country road trips or a weekend getaway. Both consumers and journalists alike are quick to point out that the QX80 and Nissan Armada are practically identical. But Infiniti isn't the only manufacturer that's taken a platform and perfected it through cosmetic enhancements. The road presence for this 3-row SUV is striking, and Infiniti has never disappointed when sprinkling in their own styling and personality into their vehicles, as the chrome accents, angular mesh grille, and aerodynamic headlight housings intensifies the classy demeanor of the QX80, but also gives this 3-row SUV a retro design that many longtime buyers in this segment love. Compared to its cousin, the structural features complements the boxier body lines, but also for an SUV hovering around $90,000, the upscale aesthetics and minor touches certainly go a long way. On the Sensory, you will have LED fog lights to provide additional lighting on dimly lit back roads, and also keeps the front fascia looking clean and modern. Moving over to the side profile, this QX80 is sitting on 22-inch dark chrome wheels, which surprisingly didn't negatively affect ride quality, and most of that can be attributed to the hydraulic body motion control system that comes equipped on the Sensory. Despite not utilizing an air suspension as we see from rivals, the QX80 does feel quite premium on the roadways, and this alone is worth opting for the top trim over the Luxe and Premium. you'll have chrome side mirrors with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Then coming around to the back, grabbing your attention first will be the chrome strip that runs the length of the liftgate and integrates into the LED taillights, which is a signature look for Infiniti models. Not uncommon in the automotive world, but surprising for a vehicle such as the QX80, the turn signal indicators are mounted on the bumper rather than being a part of the taillight design. It's the rear fascia where you'll notice the similarities to the Armada more, but since a lot of the appeal for a three-row SUV is predicated on the powertrain, interior comfort, and practicality, the attention to the smaller details isn't a primary motivator or indicator for premium luxury. Under the hood, the QX80 is powered by a 5.6-liter V8 engine, producing 400 horsepower and 413 pound-feet of torque, and is paired with a 7-speed automatic transmission. Despite weighing around 6,000 pounds, this large SUV is capable of going from 0 to 60 in less than 7 seconds, which is rather remarkable, but also as a driver, you'll have the confidence to get the QX80 up to speed and safely pass slower drivers on the highway. Considering that it shares platforms with the Nissan Titan, the QX80 performs quite well, resembling other rivals in this segment, and we'll take a deeper dive into the driving dynamics later in this review. When it comes to the drivetrain, rear-wheel drive does come standard, but most likely you'll opt for four-wheel drive for better year-round capability. For fuel economy, you're looking at right around 13 miles per gallon in the city and 19 miles per gallon on the highway. Stepping inside, you're greeted by power adjustable, heated, and ventilated leather trimmed seats for both the driver and passenger, with the driver's side being 2-position memory for added convenience. While not the most plush in this market, buyers with bigger frames will find these seats to be supportive yet firm, and no surprise is that bolstering is kept to a minimum. With the Sensory, the diamond stitch design that draws your attention the minute you open the door is also found on the panels as well, which does reflect its premium luxury nature. In front of you, between the analog gauges, you will have a digital information display, and by using the buttons mounted on the steering wheel, you can scroll through the menus embedded on this screen, access safety settings, and check fuel economy statistics among a list of other features. The most notable change that was made for the 2022 model year is an all-new 12-inch touchscreen with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto compatibility to go along with onboard navigation. This replaces the dual touchscreen setup that was found throughout the Infiniti lineup in the past, and buyers will enjoy the responsiveness and resolution of this head unit. Adding to the user-friendliness of the infotainment system, there will be a rotary dial and quick access buttons to get you to different menus. But more importantly is that parking assist button, which activates the front-facing camera to help you navigate tight spots. In addition, you'll have a top view and rear backup camera with trajectory to go along with front and rear parking sensors. While this user interface isn't the most in-depth, it's straightforward and provides a no-nonsense experience for drivers not looking for the most high-tech cabins. However, the Bose Performance Series 17 speaker sound system that comes standard for the Sensory will make longer drives enjoyable as you listen to your favorite music. Below, you'll find the buttons and dials for the 3-zone climate control, front and rear defrosters, and 3-level heated and ventilated seats. And tucked away seamlessly into the dashboard is a wireless phone charging pad and 12-volt outlet. As you make your way back towards the center console, you'll also have a USB-C and USB input. And mounted to the right of the gear shifter is the drive mode selector to help tow and take on a variety of terrain, including snow. For the center storage compartment, you'll have plenty of room for smaller items. And rounding out the front seating area, above will be a power moonroof to let in some natural light to the interior. Now moving on to the second row, we're going to start off on the passenger side. And the seat has been adjusted all the way back and somewhat on a recline. And I have more than enough legroom to work with back here. Now, of course, I am only around the height of 5'5", so I'm not the tallest person out there, but I do believe that if you have average-sized adults sitting in the second row at any given time, they should be more than comfortable because you do have a good amount of headroom, but also a lot of shoulder room as well, especially since we do have captain's chairs for the QX80. You have a nice wide center console as well, where you can use this as a center armrest, and you can just relax and enjoy the driving experience, and it really gives you that premium luxury SUV feel. But there are a few things that I want to point out here about the QX80 because, as we all know, interior spacing isn't as abundant or as copious as what we see from American brands, such as the Cadillac Escalade, but also the Lincoln Navigator as well. But since we've already talked about this before, I'll bring it up again, that the QX80 does undercut a lot of its rivals in this segment. So there are trade-offs here and there. And one of the trade-offs is the fact that we don't have a panoramic moonroof. Now, I don't necessarily care that we don't have that feature, but I'd love to see more natural light enter the cabin of this vehicle and make the interior seem a lot bigger than it is in reality. And then also, since we do have screens mounted on the backs of the front row seats, I feel as though that I am sitting closer to the front row than I probably am in reality. So that's just playing around with my perception a bit. But outside of that, that's probably the only thing I would like to see change for the next generation is just the ability to have that panoramic moonroof. But also I would like to see more adjustability for the second row as well, just to really add to that comfort level and that comfort aspect, especially for an SUV priced around $80,000. Also back here, you do have two level heated outboard seats to go along with climate control. Then on both sides of the center console, you are going to have a USB input. Then beneath that, a 12-volt outlet and a 3-pronged outlet. There's also a button on the center console in front of you where it gives you access to the center storage compartment for the first row, which I think is a really neat and cool feature for this vehicle. Then returning to the screens, you do have on the driver's side a USB input, an HDMI outlet, and also a headphone jack, which you can find on both screens for the second row. So that way your kids can watch movies on a longer road trip or drive, but also with those headphone jacks, that way they're not bothering you as you are driving on those longer road trips. Then for the center console between both second row seats, the center storage compartment is very sizable, where you can probably fit a couple water bottles back here. Also, I think probably some smaller tech gadgets as well. And rounding out the second row seating area, you do get 2 cup holders. Now moving on to the third row, hopefully you guys can see me back here. When it comes to legroom, it's going to be better than what you'd experience in a 3-row crossover, such as the Genesis GV80, Infiniti QX60, and also the Acura MDX. Up against the Euro crossovers, the Infiniti QX80 is going to be the better option because it is a full-sized SUV. Also, you're going to notice that for smaller kids, they're going to be more comfortable as well. There's a good amount of legroom, relatively speaking. Now, even for someone at my height, around 5'5", this is doable. It's not ideal because these seats are bolted to the floor, so I am sitting in more of a ball form, so I'm definitely going to feel that after a longer drive. But if you're going on a road trip with the entire family, it can definitely work for sure. What I also like about third row seats is that they recline a bit, so that way you feel a bit more comfortable and also gives you a bit more space. And then rounding out the third row seating area, on both sides, you are going to have 2 cup holders. Now coming around to the back, behind the third row seats, you're looking at right around 16.5 cubic feet of room to work with, which doesn't sound like a lot for an SUV of this size, but believe me, it's more than practical for daily use. I was able to fit all my camera gear today and still stack on more items if I really wanted to. So that's 2 bags of camera gear, a gimbal box, and a tripod. And for most 3-row crossovers and some 3-row SUVs, when the third row seats are up, it's just not spacious enough for what I need it for. Whereas the QX80, I think you could certainly fit a couple travel cases if you are going on a road trip with the family. That's a lasting impression for me with this SUV. Then with the third row seats full, you're looking at right around 50 cubic feet of room. And that right there is why you want to make the leap from a 3-row crossover to a 3-row SUV. So you're going to have probably 10 to 15 cubic feet of room more than a 3-row crossover when the third row seats are down. So that's a great upgrade in my opinion. Then with the second row seats folded, overall you have right around 95 cubic feet of room. So even though the Infiniti QX80 might not be as spacious when it comes to the interior, it's certainly more than practical for what you need it for, whether you are going on a road trip with the family, maybe going skiing and snowboarding during the winter. You have plenty of space to load up all your items and gear. Then on the right side of the rear cargo area, you will notice 2 rows of buttons, which will automatically lower and lift the 3rd row for added convenience. And then once you're done, just press the button and the liftgate will close automatically. Before I film a review, I always check out the sales figures of the vehicle that I am filming to get a good idea of where it places in its market and really rationalize and understand why Americans are drawn in by the particular vehicle that I am reviewing. And the Infiniti QX80 to me is a very intriguing full-sized SUV because the 3-row SUV segment is dominated by the Americans. The Chevrolet Tahoe, Cadillac Escalade, Lincoln Navigator, and now the Jeep Wagoneer. But the Infiniti QX80 has been very consistent over the last 17 years, where even during the recession in 2008 and 2009, Americans were still buying these. And now that we're in 2022 and actually near the end of the life cycle for this particular generation, the Infiniti QX80 is really surprising me in many ways. It's throwing me a lot of curveballs because for a SUV that's built on a body-on-frame chassis and also related to a pickup truck, it doesn't drive like a pickup truck. In fact, on this really bumpy road, I don't even feel any of the imperfections at all. It's like driving a cloud. And that's not something that I was expecting walking in because other SUVs in this market, such as the Cadillac Escalade, really drive like the pickups they're based on. It almost feels like you're driving a Chevrolet Silverado with the Cadillac Escalade. Whereas this, yes, it has the Nissan Titan-esque interior design and characteristics with the steering wheel and also the handling ability, but the suspension is a completely different story. Now, of course, we do not have air suspension, which is a bit of a surprise for an SUV at this price point, but I think some buyers would say that's one less thing that you have to worry about braking. And what's really interesting about this suspension is that it's very soft. Like there's no sense of a lack of refinement. And also one thing you've probably heard me say throughout this review and maybe even later on in this review is that it doesn't feel rigid and there's not a lot of ruggedness to this SUV. And I think that's why Americans really like the QX80 because it's luxurious, it's upscale, it's an SUV that you can maybe tow an RV or tow a boat, go on a long road trip with the family and have a great time. The seats are rather firm, but they provide a decent amount of support. What I also love too is that the interior is very high quality and it really gives you that sense that you are driving an $80,000 to $90,000 vehicle. Now, when it comes to overall vision and seating positioning in the QX80, it's a completely different experience than the Infiniti QX60. So you sit pretty high up in this SUV. It feels like you're driving a pickup truck, although, as I said before, the suspension really changes up your perception of how big this SUV is, but also how refined it is. Now, when it comes to the vision, though, A-pillars are very aggressive, and of course, you have a handle on the A-pillar to help you get inside this vehicle, which does create a bit of a blind spot. Looking out directly ahead of you, nice panoramic view, but where the hood is, it's angular and also it sticks out a bit more, which is why in a parking lot, I highly recommend pressing the camera button on the center console so that way you can access the front-facing camera with trajectory, because there is a lot of blind spots there to deal with, and especially if you are maybe at the pickup line at your kid's school and a small kid walks out in front of you, you're not going to be able to see that kid. So from a safety aspect, definitely make sure that you use that front-facing camera. Now, when it comes to the side mirrors and looking at your blind spots, they're decently sized. I can see what is in my blind spots, and of course, the blind spot detection is on the A-pillar itself rather than the mirror, which I actually really like. Then looking out back, since we do have the digitalized rear view mirror, I'm just using that today because I can see everything behind me very clearly, and that's probably what you want to do if you have kids inside the QX80 with you, where that will create a blind spot in and of itself. Now let's check out what the handling is like for the QX80. I don't expect anything sporty or aggressive, but just to make this review fair, let's see what it is capable of doing. I do like the brake feel. It gives you a good amount of confidence. Oh, listen to the sound of that V8. Yeah, there's a lot of body roll here. So nothing sporty at all about this SUV, which isn't too much of a surprise. But I do like the steering though. It's not weighted, it doesn't give you feedback, but it's direct. Once again, on the brakes, nice and smooth. Pretty impressive to slow down an SUV of this weight. Many of my colleagues like to throw in the BMW X7 and the Mercedes-Benz GLS into the mix as direct competitors to the QX80. And I just can't subscribe to that at all in any way, shape, or form, even if you want to say, well, pricing does match up. Now, not only is the X7 built on a sedan platform, it's related to the BMW 3 Series, but the X7 is also a sporty crossover. Whereas the QX80, as I already mentioned, is built on a body-on-frame chassis, and it's related to a pickup truck, and it has those tendencies, even though the suspension might give you the impression that it's a huge crossover. And that's the key to the Infiniti QX80's success, is that it's comfortable, but it still gives you the V8 power. It gives you the pickup truck-like driving dynamics, while at the same time still giving you a driving experience that is reflective of the price point. Some will claim that the Infiniti QX80 isn't the quickest SUV out there. It certainly isn't. But when you take in consideration that this SUV is 6,000 pounds and has a 0 to 60 time below 8 seconds, that's rather impressive. But with this SUV, there's nothing sporty or dynamic in any way, shape, or form. It's a luxury SUV. And when you factor in the pricing, when you take a look at the features, the ride comfort, the interior quality, and I think even the interior spacing, that right there is why buyers have really loved this SUV for the past 18, almost 20 years. Because, as I've said numerous times, it undercuts the rivals. So it gives you an opportunity to buy something that's upscale, that's premium, without paying over $100,000. Now, a number of people will probably question as to why the Infiniti QX80 is held in such high regard, despite the fact that you have the Nissan Armada, which is more affordable, but also is basically the same vehicle. And I think it ultimately boils down to brand recognition, where consumers in this market would prefer owning a Cadillac Escalade, Lincoln Navigator, or the Infiniti QX80. But I feel the QX80 for the past 2 decades has really been the perfect flagship for this manufacturer. And really, I think, is the one SUV that buyers can look to and say, yes, I would prefer buying an Infiniti over a Lexus LX or a Lexus product, or compared to some American brands that are out there in this market. And it's because Infiniti really focused on what buyers really want in this market. They want to feel as though that they're getting their money's worth at around $80,000. The interior quality, it's nice leather-stitched dashboard, leather-stitched armrests on the door panels, or just the way this SUV performs, even at highway speeds. It's very comfortable, very enjoyable, and it just feels very well refined, which is not something that I was necessarily expecting walking into this review. It feels very composed on the road at highway speeds. You don't really hear a lot of road noise, and that's another characteristic I love about this vehicle, because it's very quiet in here. Outside of getting on the accelerator and hearing that V8 roar, it's pretty quiet in here. That's the only noise you're going to hear pretty much while you're driving on the highway or even in suburban roads. Now, had I reviewed the QX80 before the QX60, I would have said that we need to see more of this trickle down to the more affordable markets. And now I feel, having driven the QX80, experienced it, and reviewed it, that we're now starting to see these characteristics make their way into more affordable markets for the brand, which is why I'm really looking forward to the refresh for the 2024 model year, because that's going to give us a lot of indications as to where Infiniti is going in the future. But this right here, this SUV, is the one shining glimmer of hope for Infiniti, where it's like, yes, this brand is capable of giving you an upscale driving experience. It's capable of giving you a great powertrain, and I think a decent transmission as well. The 7-speed automatic, I find it to be more than sufficient and similar to what we see from other vehicles in this market. And then also when it comes to just the interior design as well, this is exactly what you would expect for an SUV at around $80,000 to $90,000. So to quickly wrap up this review for the Infiniti QX80, there's two takeaways that I have for this three-row SUV. One being is the driving dynamics, because when you walk into an SUV in this particular segment, you expect some rigidity and also ruggedness. And that's what you'll get with a GMC Yukon, Chevrolet Tahoe, and maybe not so much with the Cadillac Escalade, because the Escalade is supposed to be the luxurious option from GM. Now, this does have a body-on-frame chassis, shares the same platform as the Nissan Titan, and of course has a V8 engine. So it has the pickup truck tendencies, but when it comes to its on-road demeanor, it goes over the bumps and imperfections with ease. And the ride quality is very upscale, which is, to me, a big surprise, because it doesn't have air suspension. So it has adaptable suspension, but you'd expect it to really not feel as refined as what you would experience in maybe a 3-row crossover in this segment or in this price range, such as a BMW X7 or Mercedes-Benz GLS. And yet, I found this to be a very pleasant vehicle to drive. And I think that's really enhanced by the interior quality as well, with the leather seats, but also the leather seats dashboard trim pieces, and also leather trimmed door panels as well. It feels really nice in here, despite the fact that you don't have a lot of technology that we see from the Jeep Grand Wagoneer and also the new Cadillac Escalade. But we're going to be seeing a change for the QX80 probably by late next year. So I'm not really going to focus on the fact that you don't have a full digital gauge cluster. But I still feel as though that at around $80,000 to $90,000, this is still on par with its closest rivals. Then takeaway number 2 is the overall practicality, which, as we already mentioned before, it's not going to be as spacious as some of the American rivals. However, one thing that I can really appreciate is the fact that behind the third row seats, there's enough cargo space where I can fit all my camera gear and then some. And a lot of 3-row crossovers and some 3-row SUVs just don't offer that, just don't give me that ability. And if you do have a family and you have kids in the third row and you are going grocery shopping, I think we can definitely do that for sure. There's enough space back there, and that is something that really was a lasting impression for me. But also, even for the third row itself, I had enough legroom where I could sit back there on a longer drive. Now, it wouldn't be comfortable, but I wasn't cramped necessarily. So even though, once again, it's not as big as some vehicles in this market, it still gives you the utility and the practicality that you are looking for, especially since the QX80 does undercut a lot of competitors in this segment. So guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also make sure to follow me on Instagram at Boston Autoblog so you can see what I'm up to and what vehicles I'll be featuring in the future. And I will see you guys next time.